Now we are going to start our session. So can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I, on behalf of Department of Geography, DCB Girls College, Jorhat, welcome you all to this webinar. And I am Pahari Dole. And today is the second day of our webinar. Okay. Today is the second day of our webinar on the topic COVID-19 and its impact on the society. And for today's session, we are glad to have with us two eminent resource persons. It's overlapping. I'm so sorry. And for today's session, we are glad to have with us two eminent resource persons. Our first speaker is Dr. Joydeep Baruah, Associate Professor from OKD Institute of Social Science and Development, Guwahati. Sir have recently joined. Welcome you, sir. And our second speaker is Dr. Partha Das, who is the head from Water, Climate and Hazard Division and Organizing Secretary from Aranya, Guwahati. So I would like to welcome sir to our webinar. So now my colleague Ms. Bhashwati Das will give a brief introduction of Dr. Joydeep Baruah sir. So I hand over the session to my colleague Bhashwati. Bhashwati.
Thank you, Ms. Pahari Dole. Am I audible to everyone?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Ms. Pahari Dole. Now, I would like to give a brief introduction of our today's speaker, our first speaker, Joydeep Baruah sir. So we are very happy that Dr. Joydeep Baruah sir has accepted our invitation. Dr. Joydeep Baruah sir is presently an associate professor at OKD Institute of Social Change and Development, Guwahati. His primary academic interests include issues related to political economy of development in general and to poverty and inequality in particular. He specializes in quantitative analysis and has conducted many significant research studies both for government and international agencies. He has been the principal coordinator and lead author of the Assam Human Development Report 2014. His publications include 2 books, Election Politics in Assam and Neoliberal State and Its Challenges. He received a summer fellowship from Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiatives, Department of International Development, University of Oxford, and visited Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. in 2015. So before starting the session, I would like to remind our participants that if they have any kind of query or questions, they can type their questions and queries in chat box, and after the talk is over, after the lecture is over, we will discuss those questions, but only those questions which are relevant to the topic will be addressed. So now I would like to request Joydeep Baruah sir to kindly talk about the issue. Please, sir.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are
Okay.
audible.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I congratulate the organizers for this initiative, and we are having series of webinars these days, mostly related to different aspects and issues of COVID-19, specifically to Assam or even India. So I'll be speaking basically because my discipline belongs to economics. So I'll be basically speaking about some of the economic issues and concerns. So I will be sharing some slides. If the host can allow my, this sharing, then I will share my slides. So currently it is disabled.
Okay, sir. Sir, you can share your slide. Okay.
Okay. Let's see. No, it's not coming till now. It is still disabled. Vasati. Okay. Yes.
Sorry, sir.
Yes. No. Can you see the slides now?
Now, sir, it's
Yes, sir.
Okay. So thank you very much. Let me begin this brief talk on COVID-19 and macroeconomic policy considerations. As I have already explained, I will be speaking mostly about economic issues and concerns, and I will try to locate this discussion to the recent announcement made by the government of India, where the Prime Minister has tried to address the economic packages or sort of announced economic packages with an aim to recover the economy, which has come under severe constraints and limitations given the situation arising out of COVID-19. So I will try to locate this discussion within that broad framework and try to see what are the different considerations that one should be taking. And in this discussion, I will try to sort of begin by some introductory remarks. Okay, so let's begin by some introductory remarks in this way, that now it is very clear that this pandemic has severe consequences, and these consequences are multidimensional in nature. Basically, what I'm trying to see is that first concern obviously is of public health. You know that the infection is rising since December, when this thing appeared in the scene in China particularly, and the thing is that then globally it's unleashed a series of infections. So public health is a major concern. Uh, can I request the other participants to the put off their mic, because it is overlapping and it is disturbing. Kindly put mic.
Please kindly unmute yourself.
Hello. Vasadi. Okay, one is public health. We know that infections are rising, and since December, when it started in China, and then starting from the last week of January, we are having now nearly 1 crore infections. And in India also, it's almost getting hugely infected. So this is one of the issues which is important. Second, obviously, is the economic issue and economic concerns. And next one is the social issue. There are a lot of issues which are very social in nature, including law and order, starting from law and order to mental health. So therefore, we have three broad categories of consequences: public health, economic, and social. I will be concentrating basically on economic issues. And at the same time, we must also recognize that there are interconnections among these three different consequences. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the severe consequences not only severe, but these are also multidimensional. Now, when we talk about economic consequences and economic impact of this COVID-19, then you need to understand the kind of perspective that one should have, that how this actually, these consequences are unleashed. And we all know that this modern economy revolves around circulations. There is a wave of circulations going on. This is not only circulations which are related to movement of goods and people, but at the same time, there are a number of economic variables which are deeply connected, and there is a continuous circulation. And these wave of circulation actually is the key to understand how economy functions. Now, during the time of this pandemic, these circulations get affected. And one has to understand that if we try to see how economy operates, then one has to see that how these circulations are, there are two aspects to it. There are two aspects of it. One is the ease of circulation, and second one is the speed of circulation. That means if the circulation is going on smoothly, then you have no problem. And how quickly that circulation is going on is also very important. So therefore, these two things are very important to understand that how economy functions. One is the ease of circulation and the speed of circulation. Uh, During the pandemic, both of these two issues, one is ease and speed. I mean, these are affected. Ease, of course, getting affected. There are blockades, and also the speed is also reduced. So therefore, in both ways, either through ease and through speed, this wave of circulation is getting affected, and that is why we see that this pandemic has actually impacted the economy by adversely affecting the wave of circulation. Next thing, it is important to understand the consequences are cumulative in nature. These are aggregate consequences, and they are very peculiar. At least 4 levels of aggregations are possible. One is not only the disease, but this is something which is very important to understand, that public health, it requires kind of a response, that when there is an infection, you have to contain or mitigate the this infection. So therefore, there is a disease and there is also a response. Now we have a response in the form of a lockdown, in the form of social distancing, in all other forms. So therefore, this actually worsens the situation. On one hand, we have the disease, which of course affects those who are infected, but response affect everyone. When you try to lock down, when you try to distance or impose social distancing, when you try to block certain activities, containment zones, if you try to do that, it not only those who are infected, but those who are not infected are also getting affected. So therefore, there is a effect is actually a cumulative or aggregate of all these things. One is the disease response thing. Second level of aggregation is actually a spatial in nature. Since it is hugely connected economy, so if something is happening somewhere and we are all connected to it, even if we are not having kind of intense, the infection, then also we are, suppose if you are affected, or in actually the this is a very peculiar disease in a sense. If you look at the world map, the most developed and industrialized areas are getting infected mostly. For instance, suppose Mumbai, for instance, suppose Delhi, for instance, southern states, compared to those who are mostly agrarian, mostly rural. So in some sense, it is affecting only those severely, where we have this problem of congestion of different kind. It is a congregation and congestion of different kinds. It can be the movement, there's a congregation of capital or a convergence of the people, goods and services. So those are the areas getting worstly affected. Now that means that since we are dependent on those areas, or even if we do not have that kind of high infection, but we are also getting infected. So there is a spatial aggregation happening, and which is very peculiar to the disease. There is also a temporal aggregation. What was happening also getting affected what was after the pandemic. So therefore temporal element is also there, and also the sectoral elements are there. If something is happening in industry, that is also affecting agriculture is affecting services. So in that way, when you have these kind of aggregation or accumulation, then the severity of the consequences increases. So that's really is an important point to understand. And last point in introductory remark is actually the uncertainty. We do not really know that what will happen next. So we do not know when the vaccine will come. We do not know how long it will take, will continue. We do not know whether there will be subsequent rounds of or waves of infection. We do not know whether the drugs will come, at what point of time it will come. We do not know the responses also. Suppose today only just 1 hour, 2 hours back, Guwahati has been put under complete lockdown, total lockdown for another 14 days. So nobody could imagine sometimes, before. So therefore, we really do not know how many lockdowns will be required, when it will come to an end. I have talked to a lot of public health experts on this subject, because I was a member of the committee constituted by the Chief Minister. So I occasion of talking to different kinds of people, so they are completely blank, they don't know really. And the most, the learned, the experts on public health are saying that it might take actually 5 to 6 years to ease out completely. So therefore nobody is actually know, and ICMR models are falling flat. All ICMR models, those who have tried to analyze the data and trying to project when peak will be there, when the curve will flatten, so everything has gone wrong. So therefore, even a WHO is completely at a at something at a corner. So they are not being able to answer many things. So what we are dealing with is a pure situation of uncertainty. And I will come to this aspect in the last slide, that when uncertainty prevails, economy suffers. The people do not resume economic activities under the uncertainties. Two things are very bad for economy. One is called uncertainty. Second one is called information asymmetry. If you do not have information free flowing, then I know something which you do not know, that is an asymmetric information, then market cannot operate, market cannot suffer, I mean function. So therefore, we are completely in a situation of uncertainty, and therefore what best we can do, we can create some situations, scenarios, that on these conditions what will be the best case, on this condition what will be the worst case, and based on those scenarios only we can actually think about some responses, that if this happens then what is to be done, that happens what is to be done. So basically what I was trying to argue here is that of course the problem is severe, consequences are grave, consequences are multidimensional, at least three stand out. One is the public health, second one is economy and the social, and there are deep interconnection between all, among these three dimensions. First, then when I take up the economic dimension, and to see the economic dimension, one has to see that how economy functions, and that actually functions in a wave of circulation. So everything is completely moving, and how economy is doing depends on two things: the ease and speed of that circulation, and the COVID-19 has affected both ease and speed of this function. Circulations. And therefore, we are from the disease. It is coming from a lot of other things. It is coming from the responses. It is also coming from the spatial aggregation. It is also coming from the temporal aggregation. It is also coming from the sectoral aggregation. So all of these have come together to produce a very cumulatively severe impact. And worst of it is that actually we are facing a situation of uncertainty. And when you have an uncertainty, clearly the economic activities suffer, economy cannot function properly, and best we can do probably actually think about the different scenarios and imagine different kind of responses. Now, let me give this data was taken yesterday. So till yesterday, this is the situation. The number of cases are continuously on a rise. It has not reached its peak. And India is also having large number of cases, around 4.75 lakh. In fact, and the 13% of world population right now is directly infected. 13%. So it's not a small number; it is a big number, and we are expecting that it is to rise. And the US of course tops the list, then Russia is there, and then another country, Brazil, I think Brazil is there, and then next one is the India. So therefore India has quickly reached the stage, obviously, because we have huge population. So even if 1% gets the infection, it is actually a large number. So therefore this is the situation, and if this is the situation, one has to see the rate of fatality, number of deaths. The fatality is not very important here. In world, we have roughly around 5% of the people dying from the disease, and out of those also who are there are some profile who are very aged or having comorbidities. Comorbidities mean they have some other severe ailments like diabetic, hypertension, cancer, COPD. COPDs means pulmonary diseases, and so on and so forth. So therefore, those out of those, it is first of all it is very low. Fatality is very low. It's not like Ebola. Ebola has a very high fatality, but it is not like that. Fatality is low, and out of those who have died are also people who are quite aged and also having comorbidities. In India also it is even less, the 3%. The problem is not here. Problem is not the disease is very fatal. Problem is the exponential infection rate. That is where is the problem is. And you have to, what problem we need to understand. This spread is the concern. It's not the fatality. And what is the concern? Concern is something like this, that you have a rate curve is the rate of increase of the disease. It starts from R0. R0 means the first case, and then exponentially it increases. It goes to 2, goes to 4, 4 goes to series. That is why it is exponentially increasing. And when you have an initial increase, then even if you have a very small amount of small number of people who are severely treated, obviously as WHO data, it is saying that some 5 to 10% of people requires hospitalization. But when the number increases, that when it is 5%, that also is healthcare system's capacity, and therefore you have to force this red curve down to some blue curve. So blue curve has to have, you have to have a mitigation strategy, containment strategy, and this containment strategy will come here, here the blue curve. So you have to reduce from here to here, and if possible you go down below the dot curve. That is you have to reduce it so that your healthcare system actually provides treatment. You can actually test people, you can actually diagnose. So therefore, what is needed, that there's a need for containment policy, and those policies are coming in the form of lockdown or social distancing. So idea is, it's that the problem is, it's not the fatality, it is the rate of spread, and because of rate of spread actually overwhelms the number of facilities that we have in the system of public health care. So therefore, it is virtually it becomes a completely the collapsed system. So in order to avoid that, you need to have a containment policy. Now, the problem here, have a trade-off now. Once you have tried to do this, reduce this public health policy, which is a containment policy. As I have said, that you have to understand the multidimensionality and interconnections. This is the classic example of interconnection and trade-off. When you try to do that, it creates an image of it in the economic front. You see that this curve, this, look at the diagram. Here the upper part is your epidemic curve. Curve, it creates a mirror in here also, because it reduces economic activities, and it creates a curve like this, that you have actually the economic recession curves going on. Therefore, once you have a containment policy in, it is going to affect the economic spheres, because you have stopped everything. You have actually imposed a lockdown. If you completely block your circulation, so economic activities stop. and therefore the economic front actually sees a recession. And if you do not do anything with it, then it is because fatality is not there. Fatality is in a yellow income, and they will be in a complete poverty. So therefore, you need to have some economic policy in the yellow front also. Once you have a containment policy in a medical front, it has to be supported by, because it has a mirror in the economic sphere. So in the economic sphere also, you need to have an economic policy. So economic policy purpose is to actually push up this, reduce the economic recession, and somehow economic recession has to be pushed through. So therefore this curve is this black curve, complete line, it is without any without any economic policies but containment. But this dot curve is actually containment as well as some economic policies. So debt is also low because there is a the containment policy, and the recession is also minimized. Now this is where we have to see this locate the lecture, that what, since we understand that there is an interconnection between the public health and economic kind of economic sphere. If you try to address the issues of public health, then there is a problem coming in the economic sphere, that it will have a mirror image of that curve, containment curve, which is the economic recession curve. So alongside your containment policies in the public health part, you need to have some economic policies to take care of the impending recession that can emerge out of those pursuance of those policies. So this is where we need to see, and I will discuss that how this economic policy should operate, what are the different considerations, and how we can actually deal with the situation. Now, before that, before you push this black curve to the dot line, you need to understand what that is for the world as a whole. IMF has come up with some 3% world contraction reduced by
Hello.
Yeah, I think there is a technical disruption.
Yes.
Yeah, he has joined.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir.
Yes. Now? Okay.
Yes, sir. You are audible now.
So the already different agencies, you look at the different agencies, including IMF, World Bank, ADB, and other rating agencies, how they have downgraded the economy, and we have seen that the growth rate are going to the negative zone. So this is what is coming out. Unemployment rate was also there. Unemployment rate, if you see unemployment rate, then you will find that already unemployment rate was going up, and this is coming from the CMI data, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. It has said that in March we have around 7 to 9%, the unemployment rate. Immediately after lockdown, during the first week of March itself, it has gone up to 23.4%. It has actually threefolded. So therefore, the both growth rate, unemployment rate are behaving like this. There's also a question of inflation, because when there is chain break, prices are going up since December. Then it has reached around 3% or 4%, and then it has gone up to around 6% or something like that. Now, next one is the external trade. The trade is also not doing well. We have got a negative trade. and the public finance. We did not have the enough resources. So all these five things are seen and found that okay, if we have this kind of a recession, these are the things that will happen. The growth rate will fall, GDP will decline, unemployment rate will go up, prices will increase, external trade, somebody is trading anyway, and the public finance, if you do not, public finance means how the resources will come from the economy to the government. When economy itself does not grow, then obviously the public finance suffers, and when public finance suffers, then people also suffer because programs, the transfers, the money that was supposed to be spent by the government actually goes down. So therefore all these things are badly impacted, and that is how this consequences, understanding that what can be the consequences are important to understand. Now, given this consequences, the Prime Minister has addressed the nation on May 12, and he announced a rescue package where he has said that around 20 lakh crore, which is 10% of GDP, will be spent for recovery of the economy. And he also announced Atmanirbharshil Bharat, that is a self-reliant Indian economy, as a part of the rescue package. And subsequently, Finance Minister came with 5 announcements addressing 5 segments of the economy, and these are the 5 elements. It is talking about 5 things: the economy, infrastructure, demography, and demand. And basically, what they are trying to do, they are focusing on these things, the land, labor, liquidity, and law, and targeting the laborers, farmers, MSMEs, industries, middle class, and so on and so forth. The 5 tranches of announcements were given by the finance minister, and these 5 announcements tried to cover the question of business, poor business communities, the poor, the agriculture, growth, and reforms. And they focus on if you look at the last part, then you will see that supply chain reform from agriculture. Already the Essential Commodities Act have been repealed, APMC has been replaced, the rationalization of taxes, simplification of laws and procedures, human resource, and the financial system. So these are already this has been done. So therefore the idea is that the Indian government has actually recognized that the consequences are going to be severe, and they have found that 5 components will be affected. The growth will be affected, unemployment will be there, inflation will be there, the public finance is going to suffer, and trade is going to decline. And based on that, they have come up with also their program as a response, which they say that okay, this is the time, and they are saying that some 10% of GDP will be spent. So that is as the announcement, but later on there was a critique that it is not actually the 10%, it is much below than that, because it also includes the earlier measures and RBI measures and so on and so forth. I'm not going to do that. I mean, this is of course an important topic, but that's not my intention. So my intention, something is different. Now when you have these consequences, these consequences have resulted in some response also. Now we need to understand whether this response, who do we see these responses? First of all, these consequences are to be seen as an external shock, because this is something which was not expected and which was beyond economic this is nothing economic about disease which has actually come. Nobody was ready, nobody was talking about it, and all of a sudden we have this shock coming from the external sources. It is not within the economy. That economy has not got anything to do with it. This is an external shock. However, the consequences of this external shock is to be seen that what I was explaining, that when you have a containment policy, there will be an economic recession. That recession is to be distinguished from the normal recession. It's not a normal recession. It's not about something which is there. It was coming as an external thing. It is an external shock and with a cumulative effect that I have already explained. And it creates the abrupt break in the supply side. You know that economy operates from supply and demand. What it does, it actually and supply is given by the different farms and industries. What will happen? That the supply chain will break immediately. The supply of inputs, raw materials, intermediate products will completely break. Okay, and then the supply of final product will suffer because you cannot produce. And when you have this increase, inventories means the unstable, unsold products, and the farms immediately see the revenue fall or profit fall, and therefore they stop investment. This is on the supply side. When you have, it is not a normal recession. When you have an external shock, sudden shock, and with a cumulative effect, then on the supply side, what will have? It will actually unleash a series of things, and it will result in the decline in investment. Now, on the demand side, what will happen? There is employment loss, because if nobody is investing, there is no production, so nobody is going to employ anyone. So there will be employment loss, there will be wage and income fall, and there is also, as a result, the consumption will decline, and demand will, and this is the household sector. So therefore, both household and farm will be having effect in terms of two things. One, there is a supply chain break, and other one is actually a demand decline. So therefore, when you have that kind of a situation, and also the external trade suffers, both export import will decline. So if this is this is the pathway of consequences, then it actually sets you the macroeconomic policy which I was talking about, that you need to have some policy. So what are the policy? You need to address the supply issues. That means you need to actually increase the investment, which is either declining or stagnating. And the demand side, you have to take care of falling income and consumption. You have to actually support households, support individuals, so that they can resume their consumption, they can resume their employment and income. And therefore, obviously, now you have two broad, in this setting, you have two macroeconomic concerns, that how to increase investment and how to increase consumption. So these are the two focus areas where the economic policy should actually try to target. Now, what are the important considerations? There are some important considerations. So these are the things that actually, when you try to read the rescue package of the government, then you have to see whether this rescue package is going to increase investment and whether the rescue package will be effectively increasing consumption. These are the two questions you need to try to see, you try to investigate, examine, and then you try to answer that whether this is actually yes. If you have yes in both, then it is going to work. If does not, then it will not going to work. So therefore, the rescue package that has been announced by the government is to be seen in this perspective, that whether it is going to increase the investment and whether it is going to increase the income and consumption. And if it is, then it is fine. But if it is not, then entire rescue package is not going to work the way it should work. So that is what is to be understood. Now, while doing that, there are some important considerations, and this is, I think, very important to understand. What is important is to see that when this external shock has struck the economy, the moment. What I mean by this, that economy is always actually going through a business cycle, that there are some expansion, there are some recession, there is very low, there is some high, and in this process you see the upward moving straight line. This is how economy goes, and within that you have temporary kind of recessions and expansion. So therefore, either you can have a shock striking at the phase of expansion, then consequences will be completely different. And if you have a striking here during the phase of recession, then it is going to be even worse. So therefore, when you design a policy, then you have to see, and that is what I've said, that you temporal dimension, that what was before, and then only you can understand what is going to be after. So therefore, the point is that it can strike here during the phase of expansion when everything was right and you have COVID, then situation will be completely different. But if something was not going properly, economy was already in a bad shape, and you have a COVID-19, then you are having a very worse and far-reaching implication for the economy, and your policy has to take care of it. So therefore, you cannot have a general policy ignoring the fact that when actually COVID-19 or any external sector shock has struck the economy. The moment of striking the economy is extremely critical in designing the policy itself. At what phase we have seen that kind of a shock. Now, India's case, let's see where we have got this, the striking of the COVID-19. This is what was the case. This is taken from the Government of India data. This is the new data, that is the 2011 series data. It shows the growth rate. And you see that since 2016, the economy was in a constant decline, that is the recession phase. So it started with the 8.2% growth rate. Next year, it reduced to 7.2. Next year, it reduced to 6.1. Last year, it was 4.2. So we were not in an expansion phase. We were actually in a recession phase and then COVID-19. All right. So therefore, this point is very important to understand that when we have this problem, we have a problem when we were already in a recession. All right. So therefore, and if you see the year, this was the peak for the moment for our cycle now during the last 8 years, 9 years. This 16, 17 is the demonetization year. So people are already arguing that this is the 16, 17 is the year when we had demonetization. So after demonetization, the circulation got affected because you have withdrawn currencies from the economy. So circulation got affected and we were not being able to recover that shock. All right. And we were on a downslide and you have COVID-19. So therefore, your striking of the COVID-19 was not in an upswing, but it is in a downswing. And this is important to understand, and this is very critical to understand and appreciate the policy right now. Now, if we have this, this GDP, the gross domestic product, we can have debates on gross domestic product as a measure of economic, well-being. But for the moment, let us take this, which is a very crude measure, but it serves the purpose. So GDP as a whole was on a decline when COVID-19 struck us. Now, you see the components of GDP. This is the whole going back to the Keynes, for instance. When Keynes is an economist who tried to understand the recession in 1930s, and he said that GDP actually is a composed of 4 things. One, CIGX. What does it mean? C is for consumption, the total consumption expenditure. I is the total investment, which I was talking about, the firms was making. G, government expenditure, public finance, and X is the export-import balance, that what is the trade earning. So these are the 4 components of the GDP. And if we look at the same data, it also gives you the share of these 4 components in the GDP. You will see that the consumption expenditure, the economy, consumption expenditure is around 55 to 60% actually consumption expenditure. So that is the key component. If something happens to consumption, then you are going to see a reduction in the GDP. So that is the 55 to 60% over the years. Since 2011, you are seeing that it is pretty constant, and you see that 55 to 60% actually is the component of the GDP is actually consumption expenditure. Next one is the investment. So investment is around 30%, roughly closely around 30% over the years. So 60 plus 30, 90%. So that 85 to 90%, that means these are the 2 components. Government expenditure is very minimal, 10% or less than 10%, and then the export import, which is even worse, less. So therefore, the key component are what? The consumption and investment. And therefore, if there is a decline, then obviously that you need to see which company is actually going down. And we can do that if you look at the graph, which gives you the rate of growth of these components. Then in the last 2-3 years, you will see there's a sharp decline, and even in the negative domain, the consumption has gone down, the investment has gone down already. So therefore, what I was trying to argue is this, that consumption, investment, and trade have seen a contraction prior to COVID-19 outbreak. That's the government data. All right. So when you have the consumption is already declining, the investment is already declining, trade was already declining, then if you have that kind of a shock coming in, then this decline will accelerate. The consumption decline will accelerate. The investment decline will accelerate. That means earlier, if it was 5% decline, now it is going to be 10%, 15% decline. So if that is the case, then you have to take care of this entire thing. And another data is very important. And then we will see that how this GDP growth rate, whatever growth rate we have, 6%, 4%, 5%, what is the share of the growth in these components? Then you will see the last, if you look at the 2019-20, for instance, what is negative? The investment was negative. GFCF is the gross fixed capital formation. That means this is the new investment coming up in the economy. So that was already negative. That means no new investment was taking place. No new investment was taking place even before the coming of the COVID. So therefore, we have a very peculiar situation. This moment is very important. The COVID-19 has not come when we were expanding. COVID-19 has come when we were contracting. And therefore, the macroeconomic policy consideration is that to recognize this thing very clearly, that we were in a recession, then we have an external shock. So shock is going to multiply, and we need a huge, the backup in terms of this economic policy. The question is what is to be done, how it is to be done. Now, there is a standard economic theory, that when there is a shock, then how these components behave, how consumption behave, how investment behave, how trade behave. So you need to see how they will respond, and then only you can create the stimulus. Stimulus means what? The stimulus means that when something stops, this is coming from the biological sciences. Stimulus means that when suppose people are in coma, then you inject some medicine to activate the senses. So if you have an economy which is already paralyzed, then you need to make a single dose which regenerates the economy. All right. So this is where is the idea of stimulus comes. So you can design the stimulus provided you know the extent of paralysis which is there in the components. Now, the consumption is a very important behavior. The consumption is relatively smooth. Why? Because people, when you have earned, people when they earn more, they save, and when they don't earn, they de-save. That means they withdraw the saving. And there is also a credit. You can get certain things when you can, get credit loans. So therefore, savings and credit acts as a smoother for the consumption. All right. And there is also a co-insurance. Co-insurance means you can rely on other people's help or something like this, but that can work only when you are affected but others have not. All right. If the entire economy is being affected, then you cannot expect that other people will help because they are already sufferers. So therefore, in any case, typically the consumption is smooth because you have got the savings and you have got the credit as a smoother, and therefore people take care of it. That okay, if I am not getting today income, then I can de-save something. Whatever I have saved, I can spend it. Or if I don't have spending, or savings, then I can go to the credit. So this is one. Second, the investment is not like that. Investment is completely volatile. There is no incentive for the investment to be very smooth. It is always volatile. There is no motivation unless there is an opportunity for profit. So it is basically dependent on the business outlook. All right. And the external trade is dependent on other countries. It cannot be dependent on the one country. So therefore, we cannot talk about it right now. And the government expenditure are also limited by the fiscal constraints. Now, this is the reaction to the shock. When there is a shock, only consumptions tend to smoothen out. Rest of the things will not smooth out. However, we know that two policies are being attempted. One is the monetary policy, which targets providing liquidity. And this means that you reduce the rate of interest so that your cost of investment comes down. Now, when that happens, whether question is, as I have said, whether investment will increase or not. Now, this is not going to increase the investment because investment primarily depends on the business outlook. The lowering of cost of investment or rate of interest actually helps to make up for the loss of profit. Whatever profit was lost, it will be given some benefit to the farm to remain afloat. That means they are in the business, but that does not mean that they are going to invest. So therefore, it's very difficult to say, or it's not proper to say that this is going to increase the investment. So this monetary policy hardly actually affects this kind of shock in a good way, and it does not lead to increase in the investment. At the same time, if you think that this concessional credit or low cost of credit will be useful for consumption, that does not work either, because people are constrained by the credit system, that everybody cannot access. Secondly, they do not have collateral, they do not have other things, and people will be reluctant because they do not see any income coming in the future as well. So therefore, you have a system where investment is not increasing and consumption is not gaining because of this monetary policy. All right. What is important at this moment is actually the fiscal policy. And this fiscal policy means this is direct spending from the government, and which is a fiscal stimulus, which we call, and it works as a multiplier process. That means if you spend 100 rupees today, this 100 will go and change hands, and then it ultimately it will impact much more. But how do you do it? There is a problem, because you don't have that kind of money with the government right now, because already we were in a recession. Had it been that, this is important to understand, that had it been the COVID-19 in a phase of expansion, then we should have a physical buoyancy, fiscal buoyancy, because we have enough money and we can come up with a lot of the programs and all these things. But that does not happen because we are in a recession already. And therefore, what we can do, we cannot give money directly in the form of cash transfers right now, because we don't have that money. What we can do, we can go for the expansion of the public service schemes. We have a lot of schemes, national security programs, national food security programs, MGNREGA, which has been done, additional allocation was given, and other programs. The NHM is there, the livelihood mission is there. So we have already programs in place. So these programs are to be expanded. So it is not a question of giving money to people right now, but we need to actually accommodate more and more people. So we have to do two things. One, increase the coverage, make it universal, so everybody can access this thing, not targeted, make it universal, and also increase the scope of these things. For instance, suppose NREGA. So probably that within NREGA, you can do only 13, 14 activities. These are permissible activities. So you need to increase that. A lot more activities are to be brought into the fold of NREGA so that your program increases. So therefore, right now, when you talk about fiscal policy, it is not about giving cash transfers directly, probably, because we are in a recession. And amid recession, we had this COVID-19. So best way is to actually expand the existing public services schemes in terms of coverage and scope. And if you need money, that money can be made through deficit finance. That means you can print money. Now the question comes that whether that will lead to inflation. My answer would be that no, it's not going to lead to inflation, because even this excess liquidity is not going to increase the prices, because we were in a recession, because we were not at the optimum stage. We were not in this is not a vertical supply curve. So therefore, when you have a vertical supply curve, the supply is fixed, that we are in a full capacity, then excess liquidity increases the prices. But we were not in that position, we were suboptimal. So we have some excess capacity in our place. So increasing the money supply or liquidity is not going to create any problem right now. So we can actually go for deficit finance as well. So it's not going to give you inflation, but it will give you money, and so to expand the public services programs. And most important at this moment is to rationalize the expenditure. You have a lot of schemes where we lot of money were there. For instance, smart city. Right now we don't need smart cities. We need programs for food security. We need programs for MG and Rega. So those money can be diverted or called back and rationalized, where we can use this money for expanding the public services. So I think then other two considerations, with this I will end, are the questions of inequality. Now, what is the consideration? That inequality, why is it important to talk about inequality? So when you have the social inequality going up, then there is a demand suppression, because the poor people spend more than the rich on the consumption demand. If you give 100 rupee to poor, he will go to market and buy things. But if you give 100 rupee to rich, he will save it. Right now, we do not need saving, we need consumption. So therefore, more and more money should go to poor rather than to rich. But if the other way around it happens, then more money goes to rich than the poor, then inequality increases. Poor become more poor, rich become more rich. Then it is going to create a huge demand depression in the economy, which is not required at this moment. We need a reversal of the system. There are 4 tendencies we need to check. We need to see that whether any policy are giving this kind of a shift, that if there is a shift from wage to profit, it is going to create inequality. If there is a shift from small to big, it is going to create inequality. If there is a shift from domestic to foreign in terms of investment or consumption, whatever, then it is going to create inequality. And lastly, if there is a shift from production interest to speculation interest, then it creates the inequality. So if your policy are doing any of these things, then we are not going to get a good answer, because it is not going to increase the demand. It is going to suppress the demand. So that is why this inequality is important. You can't afford to increase inequality which is already there. So therefore, you have to have a policy which is actually reverse to the system. So that is the thing consideration. And lastly, I will conclude with this, that lastly, the uncertainty is an important thing. As I have said, that we are in a complete uncertain situation now. So this, if you have an uncertainty, then economy cannot restore its activities. So therefore, the true policy, we need to give a signaling. In economics, we call it signaling, positive signal that you do your activities. There is a system in place, government is there, that will take care of your healthcare needs, that will take care of your other needs. You resume your activities, then only the economy can survive. So therefore, these are the considerations when you need to understand how the pandemic should be responded by the economic policies. And now with this tool in mind, you can now see whether the India's policies are going to do good to the economy or bad to the economy. I'm not going to give you any answer to this, but this is the way to look at or to see the economic policies which was discussed, announced by the Prime Minister and subsequently by the Finance Minister. So these are the things I wanted to tell, and it is up to you to see the policies for themselves. So this is what I wanted to discuss, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Am I audible to everyone?
Yeah.
So, sir, thank you very much for such informative and thought-provoking lecture. Now, with your permission, can we proceed to the question answer session?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the first question is from Joya Kolita Gogoi. Which sectors of the economy are likely to recover the fastest and which the slowest?
Okay. First of all, the economy sector will not be affected much and also recover quickly is the agriculture. Agriculture is the sector which is expected to be in a very fast track recovery because of several things. One important thing is that you have a seasonal, because if you miss one season, then you can actually do the things in the other season. It's not it's not that simple, because not everything is grown in all the sectors, this thing. But for that, you need to put in place a strong government intervention and infrastructural facilities. The problem with Indian agriculture is that we have actually have not done justice to the sector for last 30-40 years. I can give you only one example that will clear your doubt. It is theoretically it is expected that agriculture will recover, bounce back quickly, but where the things are, where the infrastructure is in place, it is also not very easy, and it is not expected that agriculture is will be like this. I'll just give you one example, and then that will clarify everything. In 1980, the total investment in agriculture, including private and public, was 4% of GDP. All right, that has come down to 2% of GDP in 2016. So think about it, that a sector which actually gives employment and livelihood to more than 50% of population are given only 2% of GDP as an investment, and that combines the public and the private. All right, so therefore that gives you the entire thing, that why don't we see the infrastructures in place, and that is why. So it is possible the agriculture should bounce back, but provided there is a huge investment from the government side in terms of critical infrastructure needs and all those things. So clearly, theoretically, the agriculture is supposed to come back quickly, but that is conditioned by way the government policies are shaped and then put forward.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. The second question is from our department colleague Jyoti Baruah. What is your suggestion for the revival of rural economy, especially in case of Assam?
All right. One was that, as I have said, that agriculture. I can see the rural economy in Assam depends on two things. One is how agriculture is doing and how livestock are doing. Agriculture, the Assam case is really bad because we don't have enough infrastructure in place, and also there are some institutional factors. That mostly in Assam we have subsistence farming, and only in pockets we have commercial farming of certain crops like horticulture and vegetables. But this has given a chance to the government to come up with some strong policies and some supports. And we have, personally, I was of the opinion that we need to give support to the agriculture sector in terms of infrastructure, in terms of institutional reform, and also in terms of expanding the extension services. This is one. Second, the livestock is the only one sector, including fishery, where the rural economy can see some vibrant rural economy. The livestock, there are some issues. Like the piggery sector is already facing the African swine flu and other things, but we have a pretty good market, and already ready market is there, and also we have a market gap, huge market gap. We have seen the data, integrated livestock data regarding the Assam's requirement and Assam's production in terms of meat and animal products, including eggs. So there is a ready market. Only thing is that government support is needed. Support can be of different types. I'm not going to discuss what kind of supports are required. Then if proper supports are given and emphasis is provided to agriculture and livestock, rural economy can survive this COVID-19. But at the same time, we need to be very careful about some indirect implications. I am frequently being reminded of the fact that because of huge migration, I think return migration, Assam's economy is not only going to have additional unemployment problem, but also going to have a huge capital loss because this remittance, which was coming from the migrants, were a huge part of the Assam's economy. There was some data. I can give you some reference for your understanding. The NSSO has a data regarding the migration and remittances. Average per person remittance, per month remittance average is around 3,500 to 4,000. So take the 3,000 or 3,500, and we are getting a figure of around close to 10 lakh people. So 10 lakh multiplied by 3,000 per month is your remittance. So annual remittance is going to be of that tune, and that is going to be missed out. Now no remittance will come to Assam's economy, and that part of the remittance supported rural consumption and also supported rural investment in agriculture. 15 to 16% of that actually money has gone to agriculture. Now that agriculture sector is going to see a fall of that kind of an investment, and also see a huge reduction in consumption expenditure. At the same time, additional manpower that is coming to rural areas in terms of returned migrants are going to suppress the general wage level also, because all of a sudden you will get a huge reserve army of labor unemployed, and that will suppress the rural wages. So therefore, in general, the rural wages are going to be down. So therefore, reviving economy will need two thinking. One, what are the potential sectors where government can intervene? That is the thing I have pointed out, the agriculture and livestock holds the key. Second, how do you arrest these depressing tendencies? You know, that will be the reduction that will be seen in the form of reduction in the rural consumption and rural investment in agriculture. And also there is a general depressing tendency expected in the form of reduction in the general wages. So these are the two considerations. One, the investing in the sectors where we have potential, and second, arresting the depressive tendencies. So these, if we can do this, then only the rural economy can survive, otherwise not. This is what we have been talking to government, and let's see how the things go, but as of now nothing has moved.
Thank you, sir. We will take another last question. This question is put by Dr. Pranjal Pratim Baruah. What may be the short-term and long-term consequences of liquidation of RBI reserves to meet the demand for macroeconomic policy consideration in the context of COVID-19? And second part is, additionally, how the expansionary and contractionary fiscal policies are negotiated to strike a balance to maintain the momentum of growth.
Okay, the RBI, the reserve liquidation, if I'm not mistaken, he is referring to the amount which is lying with RBI, apart from the dividends which is supposed to be given to the government, excess of dividend whatever is lying with RBI. And we have been told by different news agencies and RBI itself that some around 9 lakh crore rupees are lying with RBI. We can take that money to stabilize the economy. There's immediately short term, the consequences will not be felt, because that is the money which can be properly utilized for fiscal stimulus and other things, and there is no issue in it. But only problem with that utilization of that money is that the RBI has a capital framework, and which is of course under revision, but it has got a capital framework where it is said that in order to stabilize and in order to back up the economy, you need to have a certain amount of money. And there are some redefinitions, some reframing are going on. We do not know what is the excess money which can be used by the government. Right now, there is no data on that. The 9 lakh crore, as it is said, with lying with RBI is not fully excess. as per the framework. The framework requires that some amount of money will remain with RBI to stabilize this economy, because this is not the only crisis. We might have a current account deficit also coming from the trade situation, because China-India relations are going, in a very bad way. So therefore, you cannot ignore the fact that Chinese, the trade with India, which is substantial, if we replace it by some other, the countries, and particularly the US, then our trade deficit will increase manifold, because Chinese products are quite cheap, and compared to the US, substitutes. So if you do not buy things from China, you start by the same thing from US or any other country, then your deficit, current account deficit, is going to be increased manifold. So therefore, we might end up with a situation of current account deficit also. So therefore, to address those situations, you cannot expect RBI, or you should not expect RBI to give entire excess liquidity to the government right now. Therefore, this framework gives you the kind of excess that can be shared with the government. And even if that is there, then we can actually use that. There's no harm in it. Second question that you have said, that expansionary and contractionary fiscal policy. The fiscal policy, the basic idea of fiscal policy is that it will increase the fiscal deficit, and particularly in a situation when we are already in a recession. So you have to spend it. So whether you will allow it or not, that is the question. Right now, it seems that government is very reluctant to increase fiscal deficit. There may be many reasons. I'm not going to discuss that, but the implication of any fiscal policy is that it is going to increase the fiscal deficit. It is the willingness of the government that will decide whether the government is going for expansionary fiscal policy. Any expansionary fiscal policy will result in fiscal deficit, increase in fiscal deficit. So there should be a political decision and political willingness to go for increased fiscal deficit in the first place. Right now, I'm not seeing any the incentive on the part of the government to go for that kind of expansionary fiscal policy. Second part is that how do you get this fiscal deficit financed? As I have said, we can actually go for printing of money also. I don't see any problem personally, because we are since we are in a recession pre-COVID period, we are not in an optimal operation. We are suboptimally utilizing the economic activities. So therefore, even if there is excess liquidity, it is not going to create any inflationary pressure. Whatever inflationary pressure we are getting right now is because of the breaks in the supply chain and sudden abrupt the halt in the production process. So I think these are the considerations that one has to take a final call, and it is up to the government to decide. I mean, that's one.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for such informative and thought-provoking lecture. And now this discussion is very fruitful, and obviously it can go on, but due to the paucity of time, we have to finish this session. Now, on behalf of the Department of Geography, I want to thank Dr. Joydeep Baruah sir for giving us this opportunity to attend such a great, wonderful session. And our chat box is already full of the different views about your presentation. Many of them has written that thank you very much, sir. It was very informative discussion. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this wonderful session. So now I will like to hand over the proceedings to my colleague Juri Baruah. And thank you, Joydeep sir, again. Thank you very much. I hope you have also enjoyed this session.
Yeah, very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wish I wish I could continue, but I have to leave. So
yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, Zuriba, you are audible.
Okay. I think Partha sir is already here. Hello, Partha sir.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, sir. Yeah. So we are going to start your session. So before that, I want to introduce Dr. Partha Das among the participants. Dr. Das is an environmental scientist and a socio-hydrologist with special interest in the area of water, disaster management, and climate change. He has done research on interdisciplinary areas, mainly in the interface of natural sciences, environmental sciences, and also social sciences. He works with communities, CSOs, as well as government agencies with the aim of generating new information, knowledge, and policy perspectives on the water environment development nexus, as well as contributing towards environmental security and sustainable development, especially of the marginalized communities. He also worked on the protection and conservation of threatened ecosystems. He has more than 15 years of experience of research, advocacy in the Brahmaputra River, as well as the Baruah River Basin in India. He has carried out more than 25 research and action research projects funded by various national and international donor agencies. Dr. Das has also edited 3 books, one on sustainable natural resources management and 2 on water conflicts in Northeast India. He is presently working as the head of Water, Climate and Hazard Division in RNUC, a front-ranking environmental NGO of India, which is based at Guwahati. So today I welcome you, sir, to the session. And sir,
Yes, yes, Jyoti.
sir, session to apnale mo agbahai disu. You can please continue. You can use both the language.
Sure, Jyoti. Let me first try to share my presentation.
ঠিক আছে মই পিছত ফোন কৰিম দিয়ক স্যাৰ ঠিক আছে থ্যাংক ইউ স্যার থ্যাংক ইউ
Jyoti, just give me 1 minute. I'm trying to share my presentation. Just a minute. Just a minute. I'm trying to share my presentation. This is my presentation. Can you see the presentation here? Jyoti, am I audible?
You are audible, sir, but the screen is not.
You are not seeing, screen is not shared, no?
Yeah.
Okay, let the participants have maybe 1 minute break, and
Yeah.
I will also have time to,
That's okay, sir.
manage wherever if I have to do anything else here. Let me see. Okay. I am. Here is my presentation. And then here I am, and I want to share my presentation. Share. Can you see?
Yes, sir, but if you.
I will do that.
Yeah. Okay.
I will do that. Is it done now?
Yes, sir.
You can see? Good.
Yes, sir.
Good. So my greetings to all teachers of DCB Girls College, all students, and all participants of this webinar. I know that you already have had a very nice session from Professor Joydeep. So, I also think that you need maybe a break for a couple of minutes. But anyway, today is a very special day, and everybody, I'm sure, is in a hurry because for last, I mean, the next 2 days, we are going to see a lockdown, and which is also related to COVID. We'll talk about it now. So everybody's in a hurry. People have to go to marketing, shopping, a lot of things, responsibilities. So let us start it soon, end it soon, so that by 5 p.m. All of us are free. So I will not take more than 30 minutes. And so whenever I'm done in 30 minutes, so Judy, please give me an alert that will, keep me, on my track.
Sure, sir.
And I will speak both in English and Assamese if that is not inconvenient to you. And can I assume that all of you, understand Assamese if I sometimes speak in Assamese? Because whenever I'm talking about Assam and the local issues, I have a tendency to talk more in the Assamese, and talking in English for hours is anyway a stress and a strain. So, I mean, sometimes it helps to talk in local language. Anyway, so what I chose to speak actually, because your topic, your seminar is all about COVID-19 and impact on society. And by virtue of my background as an environmental scientist and my professional work as a disaster management specialist, so I thought I should try to analyze the whole COVID thing from both, environmental point of view, as well as also at the same time trying to look at it from the disaster management perspective. And let us see what I have as the content of this presentation. So let us start with something, two quotes which actually appeal to me, and which is very, very relevant for this webinar and this subject, because I will be mostly talking about what are the environmental dimensions of COVID-19, how COVID-19 is related from its genesis to its impact to its management with environment. So I found that the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, which is called IPEBS, which is a very new UN-sponsored body, and which is a global body that studies ecosystems, biodiversity, and and related global policies and country policies. What they have said is actually very interesting. They have said there is a single species that is responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic, which is us. Means they have held the human beings responsible, solely responsible for this whole COVID catastrophe. Next comes Inger Andersen, who is the executive director of United Nations Environment Program, which is now called UN Environment, a very prominent UN wing. And what he has said is that never before have so many opportunities existed for pathogens to pass from wild and domestic animals to people. Unless we act to protect habitat and biodiversity loss, pandemics will soon become a new normal in this century. So from these two statements itself, it is very, very evident to us, because that has come from a group of worldly known experts. What is evident for us is that COVID-19 has a very intricate and integral and umbilical relationship with environment, with biodiversity, with ecosystem. And let us see what that connection is. Now, probably all of us now by know that COVID-19 is a zoonotic virus. It is called a zoonotic, COVID-19 is a zoonotically induced disease, and the name of the virus is SARS-CoV-2. That means severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. That is the name of the virus. And this is a zoonotic virus. This means it is transmitted from animal to human beings. Now, all these the zoonotic or animal to or all those viruses that have capability to get transferred from human animals to human beings, they are increasing in number. And UNEP research says that 60% of all known infectious disease nowadays in humans and 75% of all emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic in nature. That is, viruses originating from transfer from wild animals to human or domesticated animals to human beings. So this is a very important piece of information, and it is also an alarming piece of information. Diseases transmitted from, all the zoonotic diseases can have very profound and very catastrophic impact on human health because of two reasons. Number one, since we do not have previous experience of such zoonotic diseases, we have almost no knowledge about how they originate and how they should be managed. We do not have any vaccine or medicine ready, just as happened in the case of the coronavirus. And that is why, because we do not have a vaccine ready, we do not have a medicine ready, we didn't expect it, and it suddenly appeared. That's why it has caught us by surprise, and that's why it has become a global pandemic, which is a global catastrophe or global disaster. Now, this is for many of us, we have probably for the first time heard something about corona, the word corona and COVID, but for scientists, they were not very new actually, because in recent times, and if you think about last 15 to 20 years, we have heard about a lot of new, very, strange sounding diseases which have affected human health, which were in nature all zoonotic. For example, the 2002, there was a strange kind of pneumonia affecting people in the temperate countries, which was called the SARS virus. It's also a strand of the same coronavirus. Corona is also a SARS virus. Then came avian influenza or bird flu. Then came swine flu. Then came the Middle East respiratory syndrome or MERS. Then came Ebola. Then came Zika. And very recently, we have seen the West Nile virus in Africa. So these are all zoonotic viruses. Now, in 2016, there was a study by UNEP, and even before that, there were people who were giving warning to the healthcare community, international healthcare community, that there might be, the zoonotic diseases could be a much bigger threat in the future. But for some reason or the other, people didn't give much attention to the warning. And then suddenly, at the fag end of last year, 2019 December, we were face to face with this very strange kind of pandemic, which has changed the world in front of our eyes forever. So we have to understand this is a very important aspect of the whole disease, that it originates from animals and mostly from wild animals, and it has relation to human access to wildlife habitats and animals. So if we analyze different factors which are responsible for such zoonotic diseases, we find that first and foremost, human beings increased exposure and contact with wildlife. That is responsible. And now if you further deconstruct it, you will realize how we come frequently to contact with wildlife, how we get exposure to wildlife. Definitely when we destroy wildlife habitat, definitely when we do deforestation, definitely when we penetrate deep into the forest and we catch wild animals, we use wild animals for various purposes, and we degrade their ecosystem, or we degrade their ecosystem, or we cause some kind of defragmentation or fragmentation of their habitat so that they come out. Either we go into their habitat or we create such situations where they come out of their habitat to come into human contact. So this is the very basic premise of how it happens. And then if you further analyze, you will really agree with what those two initial statements I have pronounced have said. It's all about human beings. This is all about unwise human intervention, because this is a result of destruction or loss or fragmentation or modification of habitats of wildlife. This could be forest, natural ecosystem, wetlands, right? It could be for physical degradation of ecosystems and disturbances or reduction caused in ecosystem services, for rapid urbanization intruding into rural and wilderness areas, or for conservation or conversion of forest to agriculture, and then forest to human settlement. Overexploitation of species for various purposes, such as human consumption. You know that's a very funny thing. Human beings eat anything and everything. Human beings all over the world, if you take an assessment, they eat all kind of animals actually. Now that kind of food habit, use of animals for trade, mostly illegal wildlife trafficking, use of animals for laboratory tests, for scientific experiments, for developing medicines, hunting and poaching, right? And then these are very, very direct causes why the interface between human beings and wild animals is increasing day by day. Both are coming into contact more and more frequently. And there are other important reasons which are also environmental in origin, also related to the genesis of zoonotic diseases like corona. For example, air pollution, global warming and climate change, which in multiple ways lead to habitat modification, habitat destruction, marginalization of wildlife, and even enforced change in behavior of animals. This could all be linked to different kind of zoonotic diseases that have already appeared or are waiting to appear in the future. So with this kind of background, now it is easier for us to understand that the very origin of COVID-19 has a wildlife environment ecosystem connection, which is a result of human folly. Very unsustainable, unwise behavior and interventions of human being for so-called economic growth and for so-called, whatever you call corporatization or, globalization. And there are so many economic and political trends. Current trends are different kind of act as drivers of why there is more and more destruction of nature and destruction of ecosystems and wildlife habitat. What is that? Now, when we come to, if we understand this link, then there are a number of concerns in the context of India and in the context of Assam that we have on the table for discussion. For example, take the case of Assam. Assam is one of the biggest victims of illegal wildlife trade, you know that. And the countries which are mainly responsible for sponsoring or for patronizing illegal wildlife trade, which is the second biggest illegal trade after drug, is some South Asian countries as well as China, because of a lot of superstitions regarding different kind of medicines, regarding different kind of traditional use of wildlife and wildlife body parts for and various superstitious practices. There is a increasingly thriving market of wildlife in all those countries, and it is very unfortunate that those superstitions now have even spread to some Western so-called advanced countries like Australia, like Netherlands, and people have started getting attracted to wildlife parts and wildlife related all those medicines and all those superstitions, and it needs to be really studied and examined why it's happening. But wildlife trafficking and wildlife trade is one of the major drivers of major factors that increases risk of these zoonotic diseases. Now, if you can look at this slide, it gives you how the human, animal, wildlife system interacts with each other. See, human beings have a natural interface with animals because we have livestock is an important part of our economy, as you already have discussed in the previous lecture, and wildlife for various reasons, and forests. So this interface has to be managed very carefully. And from recent example, it has become very, very clear that if you do not know enough about wildlife health, if you do not know enough about wildlife behavior, then by increasing this interface, by increasing your access into wild and wildlife areas and wildlife, you might endanger yourself. Now, as far as COVID is concerned, you might have heard that two very innocent animals that you can see in this slide. One is a bat, the other is a pangolin, Chinese pangolin. They have been held responsible. So much so that in many parts, people have started killing these beautiful and innocent animals because there is a belief that the coronavirus have originated from bats. Some people say that it has originated in China from pangolin. But believe me, there is no scientific conclusion till now. Nobody's sure. Nobody's sure. And even if it is proved that some amount of the transmission was triggered from such animals, then also there is no reason why you should hold animals responsible for that. Who asked you to go and catch those animals? Who asked you to bring those animals to laboratories and use them for different kind of scientific experiments? Who asked you to encroach into the forest so that they don't have any habitat and they intruded into human habitat? Nobody asked you. It is all because of human beings anthropogenic activities in the own economic and other interest of human beings. Now, these are examples of how the open market of wildlife is thriving in Vietnam, in China, in many other Southeast Asian countries. And in this shop itself, you can see most of the products are derived from Chinese pangolin. And they believe that the Chinese pangolin, each and every body part of Chinese pangolin and tiger, like animals like tiger, it's useful for one or the other kind of medicine. So this is basically a major reason of not only our loss of animal diversity, loss of wildlife, but also for zoonotic diseases. Now we can think about actually, we know how to stop this. Then the question is, what should we do now? So we have, it's just very simple. We have to regulate our illegal wildlife trade, which is very, very prominent in Assam. Deforestation, which is again a big problem in Northeast India. We have to control deforestation. We have to control fragmentation of wildlife habitats. So it all boils down to management of ecosystem. We have to reverse habitat destruction and promote sustainable wildlife management, right? These zoonotic diseases are transmitted at a global, regional, local spheres. So solutions should be entirely, context specific. Now, what I'm going to give you a kind of, final judgment is that the experts have now decided that there is a strong reason to ban unregulated wild animal sales, trade, and all accessory activities in China as well as in other parts of the world, especially in case of exotic species, both in public and private health perspective, if we want to stop further threats from zoonotic species. This is a global consensus in the event of the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, scientists and policymakers have come to the consensus that by any means we have to stop this unregulated business of wildlife trade and wildlife trafficking. And therefore, government of China has recently decided, and they have actually stopped all kind of animal markets, all kind of animal trade in China. So they had a moral responsibility, we know, because that country is the place of origin of everything. But they have shown us the path. The entire world now has to follow, including India. And India has a very big thriving market of wildlife trade. Now, that was the first part of my presentation, which talked about how it all originated, how the factors that helped in triggering the whole virus transmission from animals to human beings were related to human actions that degraded ecosystems, biodiversity, and wildlife habitat. Now it has two more dimensions as far as environmental aspect is concerned. Number one, COVID has brought us both risks and rewards. COVID has made us at extreme high risk, which we almost know about it. And it has also generated or produced some opportunities for us so that we can learn. And based on that learning, so that we can take preparatory measures to be able to predict and to be able to deal effectively with future outbreak of such pandemic. Now, that means there are two aspects of it. Environmental impact, adverse environmental impact of the first important aspect is to discuss about if COVID has cast or produced any negative environmental impact on art or in our society. I'm sure you all are aware, but let me repeat, or let me reinforce, let me re-emphasize that there are very important, very significant ways in which COVID has polluted. COVID has produced a very significant amount of environmental impact in our society. Now, whether we have observed or not, whether we have felt that or not, it is up to us. Let us see how. I mean, it is very easy to understand actually. What is the immediate response that we resorted to when it uh, came to, mitigating the risk of COVID? The first thing we did, we started using a mask, apart from social distancing. And the first thing the healthcare professionals or the whole public health system started doing is to use different kind of protective gears or personal protective equipment or PPE, isn't it? So now the situation stands such that in last 4 or 5 months from March till now, the world has produced an excessive amount of medical wastes. That's a very important point. And these medical wastes that we have produced is related to the management of COVID, the way we have been asked or we have planned to manage the COVID. For example, take the case of all kinds of personal protective gear or all kinds of hygienic practices that we are doing at our personal level, at our family level, or at the level of institutions. For example, take the case of all those quarantine centers or other treatment centers. A huge lot of masks, gloves, gowns, headgears, and a huge lot of other protective equipment that are every day being used to fight with a very highly infectious and contagious virus. Now, every day, this means every day, the whole system is producing huge amounts of wastes, and these are all contaminated and infected wastes. And a large portion of it is made of plastics or other plastic-like materials which are definitely not biodegradable. So this is the biggest threat. This is the biggest environmental concern now. So how to manage the medical waste that is being produced every day, everywhere, from different kind of treatment processes or different kind of mitigation or risk mitigation processes connected to COVID management. It is the most important concern all over the world. There are prescribed methods from WHO, World Health Organization, from United Nations Environmental Program, again from American EPA, Environment Protection Agency in America, and there are a host of international agencies which has suggested different kind of methods, which are quite scientifically sound and healthy. But we do not know whether, in the case of when we come to our local cases or the context of Assam as a whole, whether these methods or techniques are being adopted or not, or if adopted, to what extent. How safe is our medical waste disposal and management system at this point? We do not have much idea about. That is where, as citizens, we also have some responsibility. We need to know, we need to explore, and we need to examine and monitor how wastes are getting disposed, how wastes are being managed at your nearest quarantine center, or at your nearest medical college, or at your nearest residence where somebody is undergoing home quarantine. So these are important aspects that are very, very remarkable for a good public health system, because if we do not manage them properly, if there is uncontrolled dumping of medical wastes, which we have heard that is happening somewhere, and it can lead to public health risks. If we do not burn it properly, if we burn it openly, if we do not use the required kind of incinerator in burning these toxic medical and hospital wastes, then it can release different kind of toxins to the environment, polluting air and endangering human health. And most importantly, there is a possibility of secondary transmission of the same disease, COVID-19, through such uncareful management of medical waste. So this is the most important aspect of the environmental impact when you talk about environmental impact. So, if we come to uh, different other kind of different other aspects of all this medical waste, it has been observed that in places like Hong Kong, the sea beaches in Hong Kong, Bangkok, in many other areas, thus the sea beaches are now full of abandoned, left out personal protective equipment like masks, gloves, etc. That means people have very carelessly thrown them into the sea, into the rivers, into the drains of the city, and all have accumulated in the rivers, in the sea. So therefore, on river banks of many rivers and in many coastal areas, all this toxic garbage is now gathering, which is again a big, threat. Now, this is not the only thing. This is not the only thing. There are different ways through which these wastes, and these wastes are not, limited to only personal protective gears. There are different kind of plastic materials that are regularly being used by the health, medical and health system. Different kind of textiles, non-biodegradable textiles, different kind of metals, different kind of electronics. If you remember, for last 4 or 5 years, there is an awareness in this society to reduce and if possible to stop the use of single-use plastics. Nowadays, many of us have actually reduced the use of plastic bottles for carrying water, which is a very good habit. And the use of single-use plastic really reduced till 2019. Now, because of COVID-19, suddenly there is an increase in single-use plastic, which is unfortunately essential for the whole medical and healthcare system, and we cannot do without that. But this remains a fact that we are producing now a lot of we are using, as well as you are producing as garbage, a lot of single-use plastics. Now, many of these medical wastes find their way or are dumped in places which is very near to or linked to the city drains or city sewers, through which the sewer water goes to different treatment plants. But in Assam, we do not have any treatment plants, so they directly go to the city drains and then they go to rivers. Think about a situation when the entire city of Guwahati is under an artificial flooding, where there is no way to demarcate a drain from a road. All drains get merged with the floodwater. And God forbid, if drains have already carried toxic medical wastes or they are in touch with toxic medical waste, it will get transmitted, it will get disseminated to much larger areas during floods. And that will cause a major healthcare problem, public healthcare problem. Then air quality can be a victim if we do not take proper measure, and if we openly burn these medical wastes, or we do not use kind of suitable incinerators. And then this doesn't happen only at the level of centers where there is institutionalized quarantine. When it comes to self-medication and in the West, in many countries, many COVID patients which are asymptomatic or which are probably, for whom the disease is not that serious, they have been asked to go home, and they have been asked to do self-medication, and they have been pushed to a self-quarantined or home quarantine situation. So we need to generate, and we need to ourselves have a lot of awareness about what to do, what not to do with all the wastes that we produce when we are in a kind of self-medication or home quarantine system as far as COVID is concerned. Now, uh, those two were major environmental, well, I would say that concerns that uh, uh, that are making us worried, both globally and both at the level of the country, as well as for everybody's own neighborhood and own society. But then there is a third dimension also, which is related to COVID, and which is the brighter side of it, because everybody, almost every incident, every disaster, every catastrophe, brings with it a lot of destruction, damage, and vulnerability, but at the same time also produces some opportunities. So in the same way, I'm sure you all know, and you all can give examples of how COVID has left some positive impact on environment. Now, what has been globally seen is that air pollution has reduced in many countries to some extent, not very significantly. The emission of greenhouse gases, especially carbon and carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, has reduced. Nitrogen dioxide is a very important air pollutant as well as greenhouse gas, which has significantly decreased in concentration in the atmosphere during last 4 or 5 months. Now, why is this happening? And we all know that this is happening because of the worldwide lockdown that we are observing till today, in one or the other form, intensely or maybe in a very relaxed manner. But yes, for a few months, there were total halt on global transport system, global flights. All industries and factories came to a halt. There were no human gathering, and therefore there was a positive that had a positive impact on environment. As a result, what we have seen, many water bodies that were known for their filth and dirt and pollution have become clean. Many dirty cities have become cleaner, right? Many polluted cities like Delhi, which is very infamous, and you know India is very infamous for air pollution. 12 of the most polluted cities of the world are located in India, and Delhi is the worst. And even in Delhi, air quality has improved. So there are many examples. This has happened because of a temporary halt on human activities which were responsible for producing that kind of pollution. So in a way, this also proves, or this, puts in a very, very, this is a very clear evidence that anthropogenic activities were the reason why this pollution was created. Now, for example, take the case of Ganga. Government of India has tried to clean the Ganga to whatever extent it is possible for last 50 years. They have already pumped in thousands and thousands of crores of rupees into different kind of projects which never worked. What could not be achieved by spending so much of money and putting in so much of scientific and other kind of efforts was achieved by simple human lack of human action or simple human inaction in 3 months. The water quality of Ganga has substantially corrected, improved. So this itself is an example of how human, again, I mean, this is an irony, but it is true. But does it mean that it, on each and every occasion we would need a global lockdown to improve our environment? Is that human destiny, or is that our global environmental policy? That is the big question, actually. Now, just to refresh your memory, I have picked up some pictures from here and there from different kind of research papers and different kind of other media sources, which are well acknowledged in my presentation. Just have a look at it and see how they have beautifully shown the same city. Take every pair of photographs and see the same city, the condition before the lockdown and during the lockdown, and feel the difference. This is all about air pollution and water pollution. The same pollution getting away, getting diluted, because pollution was a cumulative accumulation of pollutants every day. Now suddenly there is no pollutant coming for a couple of, and in case of India, the improvement in water quality, air quality was observed in the very third week after imposition of the lockdown. How the swans have come back to the canals of Venice again after a long time. Now this is a miracle that is happening in Delhi actually. There are other reasons also, but this is the main reason. Jamuna, which is one of the filthiest rivers of the country. Now this is like magic. Nobody has disinfected the water. Nobody has depolluted the water. What has happened that all those industries which used to send their wastewater to the Jamuna, they stopped working for a couple of weeks and nature took care of itself. The diluting capacity of these rivers improved on its own the water quality. And then see what is happening in case of the Ganges. The dissolved oxygen increased, the biochemical oxygen demand again decreased, and the fecal coliform again decreased. So water quality has much improved in case of Ganga. And at Rishikesh and places like Varanasi and Rishikesh, scientists have said that now it has become so good, water quality has become so good, now it can be treated, and after necessary treatment, it can be consumed by human beings, right? So these are, I mean, I'm an environmental scientist. I would have never believed this if I hadn't seen it. And if there were no lockout, I would have never imagined that this kind of a situation will arise sometime, at least in the case of Ganga. Most of us were very hopeless that it will never be accomplished. Now see what has happened on its own. And it is, of course, very tragic to think and imagine that once the lockdown is lifted, things will become business as usual. And you will again see the normal dirty Ganga. This improvement is very temporary only, because we will not be able to sustain this natural correction and natural improvement in environment, because we do not have sustainable or the right kind of policies, right? So maybe this is from home near. I've not given it a title, just I'm leaving it for your imagination. Jury, can you unmute and tell me which river is this?
It's Kolong.
Yes. You are a social media person, so you know. Kolong is has been identified as one of the dirtiest rivers in India. And Right now, I am speaking from my residence in Nagaon, which is just on the bank of Kollam. This is my own river. And they're going on Sam to clean and depollute and then, rejuvenate the whole Kollam system. Now see what has happened. What beautiful thing has happened to the Kollam. The same dirty Kollam has now become crystal clear in Nagaon town. That part is dirtiest actually. I am sure the same thing is happening to River Bhugdoi. If you are monitoring it or not, I do not know. Bhugdoi is also a very dirty river, having ranking, all India ranking anyway. So I'm sure same thing is happening and the river is taking care of itself because very less industrial pollution or domestic or municipal entering into the river system during last couple of months. So nature is self-recuperating actually, right? Very spectacular picture which is very popular in Twitter and Facebook. These are all pink flamingos coming back in spectacularly large number to the creek in Navi Mumbai. They have stopped coming for a long time. Now they have come back actually. So these are, different kind of examples. There are many other examples. And you have seen all those pictures in TV and social media, how wild animals have, come to the city and fearlessly and, very casually they are roaming around on the highways and all that. Why is all that happening? Because of lack of adverse human impact for a very short time. So this is more or less the essence of what I wanted to tell you. But I also have some statistical information of how it is happening, this and that, But these are information not so rare. If you go to all those sources and all those research papers, actually, you will get a lot. But before I end, I have completed 30 minutes.
Yes, sir. So
Okay,
we have some questions also.
Okay, give me 5 more minutes because I'm going to talk about some very important issues, which is about our own state, right?
Okay.
COVID-19 and floods in Assam. This is right now happening. This is right now happening. And we should be very aware about what are the challenges and what are the vulnerabilities actually. Because we all knew when COVID started and it became a global pandemic, we all knew and we were waiting that, all these states of India, including Assam and countries like Bangladesh, which is going to be flooded in the, next rainy season, because we had a rainy season almost hanging on our soldiers, and then it will be a double disaster for vulnerable people. Then it will be a twin challenge for the government and the other agencies to how to deal with. So the actual I think one most challenging area will be the way you run the shelter camps. And this is where we as citizens have to do some monitoring or have to keep our eyes open, because we have seen in the past the way that relief camps are managed, and all these people who are helpless, who are homeless, who are victims of flood, they have no money, they have no shelter. They all come and live in these shelter houses, in the shelter camps. Mostly people live with animals and livestock. Sometimes they are separated, and they usually do not live in a very healthy environment. And therefore, maintenance of physical distancing and adherence to all hygienic practices that you are required to do for this COVID, on all to abide by all these norms and regulation of COVID-19. this is going to be very, very difficult. I know government of Assam is trying, their best to whatever they can, but there is a possibility that there could be major outbreak of uh, or major episodes of mass transmission that we cannot deny that could happen during the peak flood season, when there will be many flood shelters all over the state. So that is going to be a big challenge for the government and for the public. And since all of us are involved in one or the other way in helping uh, the government, or we are independently working for migrant laborers or for COVID victims, this situation will also deserve to get our attention. Wherever there are shelter camps, wherever there are people gathering on boats, on all those high-rise platforms, which are mostly not officially recognized, people just go and gather there. It will be not possible for them to maintain physical distancing or other hygienic norms. And that will be the most vulnerable moment for them and very dangerous moment for the state. So that will be the time when they will really need our help. That is one challenge. The other challenge is, much has been talked about, I think, during the lecture of Jyoti. But I just want to add that we have done some research in Eastern Assam, in areas like yours, Majuli and all that, to study. This was done almost 8 years back. It was started. I'm still continuing it, and we found that a lot of people, about 60 to 65% people, who have really migrated out seeking jobs and any kind of employment from Assam to various other states of India, especially southern India and western India. They actually originate from areas which are extremely flood and erosion affected. That means natural disasters and climate change impacts, which lead to more and more increasing threat of flood and erosion, have a direct link as a driving factor, as a triggering factor of outmigration from Assam to various other states. Now they are coming back. Unfortunately, we do not have a good estimate of how many people are coming back. But recently, there was a discussion and Chief Minister of India was talking about giving them different kind of livelihoods in MNREGA or through skill development, etc. It was estimated that about 6 lakhs people who were living as migrants, 6 lakhs people applied for different kind of assistance, and out of them, and 1/3 of them are supposed to have come back. That was 2 lakh people have come back, which I think is a very conservative estimate. It will be much more than that, right? Now, I remember towards the last part of his lecture, Joydeep talked about remittance. Remittance, and because we look at the whole out-migration thing through the lens of disaster resilience and climate change adaptation, what we find is that as soon as they come back and they start staying in their original villages, they are deprived of their monthly salary, number one. They're not getting any money now. And therefore, they are not able to provide that monthly remittance, which they used to do every month by sending it back to their families. Now, that remittance money had a huge role, very important role in increasing resilience to disasters, because the families in their villages invested that amount in activities which will help them overcoming the impact of one or the other kind of disaster or shock. For example, they would invest money in agriculture, they would invest money in buying a boat or in repairing their house which was damaged during flood. So these activities would lead to development of some kind of, resilience in those communities. Now, in the absence of this remittance, that process of resilience building is interrupted. This is a big concern for people like me, because we considered within certain preconditions, out-migration as an climate change adaptation practice. Now it has stopped. And if we cannot use the skill of those people or cannot engage them in other kind of activities through which they would earn at least the same amount of money, then it will not only be a big problem of unemployment and inadequate livelihoods, it will also be a big crisis in increased vulnerability and risk. So with this observation, I conclude my presentation. So basically, I highlighted three different aspects of COVID: its genesis and causes, and positive impact, negative impact, positive impact, and some amount of socioeconomic aspect from vulnerability and climate change adaptation perspective as far as Assam is concerned. There are many other dimensions which are there to be discussed, but within a limited Now I can take some questions if you have.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible?
You are.
Sir, Huna paise?
Oh,
okay. So yeah, we will quickly, thank you so much, sir, for the presentation, and you have highlighted lots of significant points, the negative and the positive also, and how it is linked with the double pandemic, double disaster situation, especially in case of Assam. So we'll quickly take 2-3 questions, and the other questions we will directly forward to Dr. Partha sir, and he will give the reply, and then we will share with our participants. The answers we will share with the participants. So the first question I'm taking from Dr. Jaya Kalita Gogoi. She had asked, is there a link between the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate change, or will the climate change make the effects of COVID-19 worse?
Of course, of course. Of course, I didn't elaborate because that was not the focus. I treated environment as a very inclusive term, which also takes care of climate. And we have had COVID, and we have thought about it seriously for not more than 4 or 5 months, and already there is a growing volume of literature. People are thinking and writing about so many aspects of how COVID is affecting, or how COVID is getting affected, how COVID situation is modifying. One of them is climate change, of course, because climate change is a very what you call a very all-pervading kind of issue and impact. It has impact on almost each and everything, right? Now take the case of Assam. Climate change is directly linked to situation of traditional livelihoods. Because of impact of climate change, there can be reduction in fish stock and fish species There can be, so it affects directly the fishermen communities and all those people who are directly, and there's a huge population, almost more than 50 lakhs people directly or indirectly depend on fish related enterprises and practices. And climate change can increase, climate change accompanied by extreme weather, extreme rainfall can lead to, and it has really, it is really happening. More and more flash floods, more and more erosion, more and more destruction. And that is increasing the whole or intensifying the whole poverty cycle. I mean, one thing leads to another, more floods, more erosion, right? More vulnerability, more risk, more malnutrition, more poverty. That again produces more vulnerability. That again produces more poverty. So it is a kind of spiral that goes on and on and on. So once hunger and poverty becomes the end result of a shock or a catastrophe, now the total human capacity or at the societal or the individual level reduces to deal with anything like any nominal shock or any nominal impact. Forget about COVID. COVID is a much more serious, much more much bigger concern. So that is one thing. The other thing, there are evidences that because of air pollution and extreme weather events can be of several types. Easy to understand examples are flash floods, heavy floods, large riverine floods, flash floods, and droughts, right? So both these situations have caused irreparable damage to ecosystems and forest habitats, which are the last shelter of certain species of wildlife. Certain species of wildlife. Take the case of expanding desertification or increasing desertification, etc. So these climate change produces various effects that directly habitats of wildlife, which again can lead to increasing the interface between human societies and wildlife, and can again act as different kind of triggers that might lead to again different other situations which may lead to again zoonotic diseases. So theoretically they are connected, they are highly interrelated. Evidences are being waited for. Now there are certain, because we have only 4 or 5 months of in this situation, but people are already monitoring how climate change or how air pollution is related to intensifying COVID risk. Thank you.
Okay, sir. The next question, we will take only 2 questions. The next question is from Deepsika Bara. She had asked, what do you think, sir, how to dispose COVID-19 medical waste? How to dispose COVID-19 medical waste?
See, it depends. There are elaborate procedures spelled out by international agencies like, as I have said, WHO, and you go to their website, there are detailed, and some of them really involve technical processes and at your and my level that is not necessary, because we do not deal with those kind of situations, but it is there. UNEP has prescribed, Environment Protection Agency America has, government of India has come up with, ICMR has suggested different kind of it, but only problem is that we have not asked too many questions about this. We are simply assuming that, and I pray to God that everything is fine, but as an environmental scientist, some amount of concern from my side would always be there until I know for sure how in real life, how in reality around a COVID treatment center or around a quarantine center, the liquid wastes on solid wastes are being treated. Now, what I said that there are standard SOPs, standard operating practices. They know that, but whether it is really being implemented, and there are some reasons why people have become concerned. You must have seen in news reports in TV that people have recovered gloves and PPE kits and head to foot gear that is usually worn by medical staff on the street, in the drain, somewhere here, somewhere there. And if they are discarded like that, and if they are not fully taken care of, if they spread out, they might be carriers of the virus. You never know. So what I'm saying is that, usually medical wastes as a standard practice are incinerated. Means they are not supposed to be dumped or thrown. If it is dumped, then the municipal worker or the rag pickers, who are completely unaware about what is there, they will, they will collect it without wearing any gloves, without any protective gear, and they will get infected, or may not be, not necessarily by corona, but any kind of other toxins and disease, right? So very first thing is that they are supposed to be burnt at high temperature. That is a standard practice. They are really actually burnt in using incinerators. But how many of our nursing homes, how many of our hospitals, how many of our different kind of healthcare systems have the right kind of incinerator? There are different kind of incinerators for burning different grades of medical waste. They are not. There is a environmental act called there's an act about how to handle hazardous wastes, hazardous plastic wastes. There are rules, there are acts and rules and everything, but in reality we see that that is not really respected. So suddenly COVID has come, we were not prepared, and I don't assume that over the night things have improved just because it is COVID, because the same group of people, isn't it? The same group of people, the same kind of people, they are involved. Now they are not doing normal duty, they are doing COVID duty. So somehow, that is a gray area, I would say. That is a gray area. We do not have much information about how it is being taken care of, but we should ask questions. As a researcher or as a curious citizen, you should simply go to your nearest home quarantine center and just see how it is being taken care of. So that is just a kind of suggestion. But I'm sure in many places things are being done in the right way. But since there is no discussion, we do not know, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for giving your valuable time. And by this, we are coming to the last section of our webinar, 2 days webinar. We are ending it here. Before that, I want to inform, already our colleague had informed in the chat box, the participants have to fill up the feedback form to get the e-certificates. We will provide it by 1 week. We'll try to provide it by 1 week. Yeah, so thank you so much, sir. It opens our mind for various questions, not only about the pandemic, but also the post-pandemic situation in terms of medical waste, in terms of double disasters, including flood, and also the other environmental disasters which are going on in our area, especially, for example, the Baruah, for example, the Dihing Patkai sector. So thank you everyone for participating in the webinar. So here I am ending it. The questions which are raised by the other participants, we will mail it to sir directly, and then we will forward you forward to the participants. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jury. Thanks.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.